Hi everybody and welcome back to the channel. So today I am going to talk about labels, right? I will discuss labels and labeling and why we have to really be careful when we're talking about labels. And so one of the things I'm going to do, besides obviously defining what labeling is to look at a couple examples of labels that we commonly hear about and that sometimes people would commonly use, and then just how destructive some of these labels can actually be when people use them. All right, so and then there are a couple other things that I'll discuss in between as I'm going. All right, so what is a label? All right, I tend to think of a label as just this blanket that you throw over something or someone. So think of a label as a blanket that you just throw over something or someone, this big blanket. And a lot of times it's obviously based on stereotypes, a lot of labels, because someone does or says something and they are a part of a certain group of people or a certain gender or a certain sexuality or a certain religion or whatever have you, then what we have a tendency to do sometimes is then to throw this big blanket over everyone else who looks like that person or prays like that person, worships like that person, or whatever the situation is, and then we group everyone in that same category. And so we throw the same label over everyone. Now, the problem with labeling is obviously is that when we group people in such big categories, because that's how we try to make sense of stuff, is that we lose the opportunity to actually get to know someone for who they are, right? So we're losing the opportunity to get to know someone for who they are when we put a big blanket over everyone. Okay, so let's go with, I wrote down a couple examples that I want to touch on. Let's think of the word feminist, right? Think of the word feminist and what that is actually supposed to mean versus what it actually means and the transformation that that word has gone through over time. So the connotative meaning of the word versus the denotative meaning of the word, right? Look at both of them. So denotative means the dictionary meaning of the word. The connotative is the context within which the word is used in reference to someone else, and how does that person interpret that word when it's used in relation to them, an object, a person, a situation, whatever the case is. So semantics, right? I'm talking about semantics when I talk about that specifically. And I'll talk about semantics in a completely separate video. So think of the word feminist. Initially, that is something that was supposed to mean women who are standing up for their rights. At a very basic premise, being a feminist was supposed to be someone who stands up for their rights, or the rights of women, right? Women standing up for their rights. The word feminist and feminism has changed over a period of time, right? Because a lot of people thought that feminism became a bad thing and a feminist became a bad person over a period of time. Feminists were then seen as angry women, not necessarily women who were fighting for what they believe in or fighting for the rights of other women to be treated equally. But feminists a lot of times became angry women. Now you can argue how this happened, and there are different schools of thoughts for this and all that sort of stuff. But if you are to take into consideration, a lot of that negativity was driven by men. Men saw women trying to have some sense of equality, and then not all men, but some men, and a lot of times men in power, labeled these women as being, just not ladylike, right? Being angry, being mad, or whatever the case is, and not knowing their place. And so feminism and this whole idea of being a feminist became a dirty word. Now, there's a lot more that goes into that, so maybe I'll do a completely separate video on that, but I wanted to give you the idea of that label, right? Feminist. So then what happens trickling down into society now is, and especially in the workplace, women who spoke up were seen as not just feminists, but what is she trying to play? Who is she trying to be when she speaks up? Men would cut women off a lot of times in conversations, and I think people are a lot more, conscious of this now than they used to be. But that is something that has happened, in just the last 15, 20, 30 years, whatever the case is, that men would cut women off a lot of times in situations. Women weren't allowed to be in hold certain types of positions, or be in certain types of leadership roles, right? And so, because they were seen as angry and this and all that has to do with that feminism thing as it trickles down into the workforce and into other areas of our lives. So that's feminism. That's just one word. Let's think of the word felon. Let's think of the word felon. If you are a felon, that's the second word I'm going to look at. Well, if you're a felon, okay, well, then that's someone who has what? Committed some type of felony. And think about if you wear that label of a felon, how difficult it is. No, I'm not saying that the person, they didn't perhaps do the things. If they hadn't done certain things, they wouldn't have gotten that name, right? Rightfully so. But think of if you have that label of felon, just how that can hold you back in your life, and the amount of things that the person can't do. Regardless of the fact that people do make mistakes. Now, I work with a lot of people who've made some mistakes in their life, so maybe I just kind of see it as people make mistakes and everybody deserves a second or a third chance or whatever. But think of if somebody has that label felon on them, how difficult it could be for them to have a job, right? And for them to be able to do certain things in society. Yes, I know there is such a thing as personal responsibility, but just think about that. Felon, convict, words like that. All right. Think of let's talk about another label. Think of the Muslim. And ever since 9/11, Muslim has become, it's a tricky terminology now, right? And when people hear the term Muslim, and how people, our tendency a lot of times with labels, as I've said, is to be able to group everyone. So now what a lot of people do is, as they look at certain people, they put them under that label of Muslim. I mean, think of it as Hispanics. There are some people who are not even Mexican, and they get called Mexican simply because of how they look. They get thrown into that one category. And then think a lot of times of how people look at someone if they are a Mexican or if they are a Hispanic person, or if they, and think of the labels too, black or white or whatever labels you want to throw out there. But let's kind of go back to the whole Muslim label. So because of that, a lot of people have been stereotyped as being perhaps, they're being seen as terrorists or whatever the case is, right? Simply because of how they worship and, the ethnic origin or race or the cultural upbringing or whatever the case is. People are looked at as that. Again, putting one big blanket over everyone, one big label over a large group of people. What labeling does is, first of all, it's a lot of times it's based on negative stereotypes that we use labels. Not always, but mostly. And what labels do is it prevents us from actually getting to know people. And I kind of hinted to that earlier, I believe. But it prevents us from getting to know people, because if all I do is to see you as a label, as one of many, then I don't get to know you as the individual for who you are. So if you only approach people on the basis of a label, then I think you're missing out on a lot of opportunities. You're missing out on a lot of networking opportunities. A lot of just somebody who could play a positive role in your life as a mentor or whatever the situation is, right? Someone who might end up to be your partner, your spouse, your whatever the situation is. So when we use these blanket labels, what it does is it makes it difficult for us to get to know the individual. Because if all I do is I see you as one of the many, then I'm not seeing you as the individual. And when I can't see you as an individual because I have you labeled, then that becomes a huge problem. And that perhaps is the biggest problem with labels and how we apply labels is it robs the individual of their dignity. It robs the individual of their identity. And then it basically says that if one person commits a crime and they look like you, then everybody else who looks like you commit crimes. I mean, how ridiculous could that be? But a lot of people make decisions based on that perspective. A lot of people operate based on that perspective. And so it's a negative to the person that you're stereotyping, but it's also a negative to you. Because I feel like you're missing out on a lot. You're missing out on your blessings because you're simply judging people that you do not know. You do not know. All you're doing is you're looking at the label, but you don't really know who the individual is. All right, so that's what I wanted to talk about today in terms of labeling. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. I can go a whole lot deeper into labels and labeling and kind of really talk about how it really impacts a lot of things, a lot more things in our life. I could talk about it in terms of the workplace, or I could talk about it in terms of the relationship and being a little bit more specific with it. If that is something that you would like for me to do, please let me know in the comments. Other than that, that's kind of what I wanted to discuss today. So, my thing is to kind of close, give people a chance. Don't just assume that someone is what you've heard, right? Don't just assume that, well, I heard this about this person or these people, so that is who they must be. Give yourself the opportunity to get to know people, and sometimes they might just surprise you. And sometimes they might live up to the labels, right? Not everybody is perfect, but sometimes people could surprise you in a good way. All right, so thank you very much for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe. Please turn on your post notifications, right? Please also don't forget to share and hit the like button. It really helps the channel grow if you were to take some time just to share the videos and to hit the like button. I would really appreciate that. And until next time, oh, don't forget to check out my other videos as well. I always forget to say that sometimes, but I post almost every single day, which is why I want you to turn on your post notifications. So always go back and look at the other videos, look at the video on perception and schemas. That would also help with this discussion on labeling as well, right? So until next time, peace.